When the Mario movie came out in 2023, fans noticed right away that Donkey Kong looked kind of weird. Donkey Kong's design had stayed pretty much the same since the 90s. So when he showed up in the Mario movie looking like this, people took note. But in the games, nothing seemed to change. In 2024's Mario vs. Donkey Kong, for instance, Donkey Kong looked just like he'd always done. It seemed like the movie must have been a one-off. Except in 2025, all of that changed with the grand reveal of the Switch 2. In games like Donkey Kong Bananza and Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong looked totally different. From his face to his eyebrows to his trademark tuft of hair, this DK was different from the ape we'd seen for the past 30 years. So in this video, I want to break down what happened. We'll uncover why Nintendo decided to embark on this major redesign, how the character was rethought from the ground up, and whether it all paid off. Here's why DK doesn't look like he used to. Part 1. The old DK. To understand Donkey Kong's modern redesign, we first need to understand where his original design came from. It's well known by now that when working on the original Donkey Kong arcade game, designer Shigeru Miyamoto planned to use characters from the Popeye series of comics, with this guy, Bluto, playing the role of villain. But late in development, Miyamoto found out he wouldn't be able to use Popeye characters in the game anymore, so he needed to quickly replace them with a set of original characters. And for the game's villain, Miyamoto decided to use an ape. Why an ape? Well, according to one of the game's programmers, being close in shape to a human, a gorilla had been chosen to make it more interesting and add a humorous touch. Miyamoto named this gorilla Donkey Kong, though he considered other names: Funny Kong, Kong Boy, Mr. Kong, and Kong Dong. Now, when Donkey Kong hit arcades in 1981, it proved hugely popular with players, and the titular gorilla soon became a star. In both arcades and on TV, Donkey Kong was depicted as a big, roaring villain. But 10 years later, the character underwent a huge change. We can trace Donkey Kong's now iconic design back to Rare Limited, a British game studio who worked closely with Nintendo in the 90s. When Rare bought themselves a fancy top-of-the-line graphics computer, they suggested to Nintendo taking one of the company's classic franchises and transforming it with cutting-edge 3D graphics. Nintendo liked this idea and put forward Donkey Kong. It was Kevin Bayliss, a young artist at the studio, who was put in charge of Donkey Kong's 3D model, and Bayliss knew that DK needed bringing up to date. To help with this, Shigeru Miyamoto sent over a number of DK drawings, including one from the Game Boy puzzler Donkey Kong 94, which introduced the character's bright red tie. However, Bayliss said in an interview, "I never really looked at them though, and just started scribbling down compact-looking little gorillas." These early sketches featured a bulky, muscular DK, very different from the character's current image. A 3D model of this design was even created, as you can see here. But Nintendo suggested a kind of middle ground, which Bayliss soon began modelling in 3D. To help with this, a group of Rare developers even visited their local zoo to look at real primates. The result of all of that work was this: a new DK brimming with 90s attitude. Over the following decades, Nintendo polished up the design a little, but really it remained very similar to that found in the original Donkey Kong Country. For millions of gamers, this was Donkey Kong. But Nintendo began having a bit of a problem. According to Daisuke Watanabe, an artist at Nintendo, people's impressions of Donkey Kong actually vary quite significantly from person to person. In one game, he might be kidnapping Pauline. In the next, he'd be go-karting with Mario. Donkey Kong began life in the arcades as Mario's nemesis, but since then he's had many guises depending on the game, be that a cool, rugged king of the jungle or a lovable goofball. Nintendo's designers felt this 30-year-old design just didn't work in all of these versatile situations. And so, in 2017, they went back to the drawing board. It was time to re-examine Donkey Kong from the ground up. Part 2. Back to the drawing board. In 2017, the same year Super Mario Odyssey launched, Nintendo began early planning on a new Donkey Kong game. At the time, Donkey Kong had been in something of a holding pattern. The country games had been revived by Retro Studios with Returns and Tropical Freeze. But with Retro moving on to a new, non-Donkey Kong project next, DK was left without a game in development once more. And so, with the 3D Mario team finishing up work on Odyssey, top Nintendo producer Yoshiaki Koizumi gave them a new project, a brand new 3D Donkey Kong platformer. This was, in his own words, with an eye to expanding the Donkey Kong franchise further. In other words, there was a lot resting on the new game's success. At this point, few members of the 3D Mario team had ever made a Donkey Kong game before, so the team started by asking Miyamoto and Koizumi what they felt made DK, DK. The answers they got back were as follows: his weight, his big arms, and his iconic moves like the hand slap. Now, I previously mentioned that the team felt that Donkey Kong was in a kind of identity crisis. One single design would have to work as a villain and also as a lovable companion. The Rare design worked okay, but it was pretty rigid. To fix this, Nintendo's designers wanted to make Donkey Kong a lot more expressive so he could better adapt to his different roles. In fact, back in 2004, on the game Jungle Beat, Nintendo had tried doing just that. According to Miyamoto, with the technology that was available at the time, we were able to make Donkey Kong more expressive. But that was still within the limits of DK's old design. This time round, the 3D Mario team wanted to give Donkey Kong a brand new design from the ground up. Shigeru Miyamoto, Donkey Kong's creator, would of course be involved in this process. In a way, Nintendo's artists wanted to harken back to the original look of the character before Rare redesigned him. Looking at some of Miyamoto's early drawings, you can see that DK was pretty expressive back then. That didn't mean that everything from Rare's DK would be thrown out the window, though. Nintendo producer Kenta Motakura highlighted his cool and wild side from the Donkey Kong Country games. He stated, "We wanted to pull together a lot of these different elements of the character over its long history to come together for the design of Donkey Kong Bananza." Some of the resultant designs were really out there, as this early piece of concept art shows. Now, when trying out a prototype of their game, it became clear just how much potential there was to bring out a new side of Donkey Kong. Art director Daisuke Watanabe explained, "As we were testing out various moves with a temporary character model in the early phases of development, it became apparent just how much bigger Donkey Kong is than Mario. This meant we could properly showcase a wide range of facial expressions." Getting down to brass tacks, what exactly changed from old to new? Well, the new DK would remove the heavy brow, which was such an iconic part of Rare's Donkey Kong design. That brow gave the character a kind of 90s attitude, which worked great in games like Donkey Kong Country. But it also restricted his ability to emote. It was a kind of Botox, stopping Donkey Kong from properly raising his eyebrows. And there was another big fix: the teeth. You might not have noticed it before, but old DK had a huge teeth problem. Sometimes he'd be shown with teeth, sometimes he'd be shown without. People began nicknaming them retractable teeth, which is a pretty unsettling mental image. Even in the same game, DK would go from teeth to teethless between animations. In essence, I think there were certain expressions where Donkey Kong needed a big toothy grin, but other times an open-mouthed gawp worked best. Ultimately though, you can't go back and forth between teeth and no teeth without people noticing. Nintendo's new design for DK would have teeth all the time, much more consistent. And then, for Donkey Kong Bananza, where you're spending basically the whole game looking at Donkey Kong from behind, he was given one new feature: some dungarees. Motokura explained, "The back view of Donkey Kong just looks like a mass of brown fur, which would make for a monotonous visual. That inspired us to make some creative adjustments to his outfit, such as giving him breeches and suspenders." And with that, a new iconic look for Donkey Kong was born, which drew upon elements from the character's long history. It was like the culmination of all of the character's past iterations: Miyamoto's original design, Rare's 90s update, plus Nintendo's attempts in the early 2000s to make DK more expressive. Daisuke Watanabe summed up, "Rather than just giving him a simple design update, we strove for a design that would get to the core of what makes Donkey Kong who he is, bringing out his unique characteristics and appeal." I think they absolutely pulled that off. But in 2023, 2 years before Bananza hit store shelves, this new design made its debut in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, with the old DK still appearing in new game releases like Mario vs. Donkey Kong. How come this new design all of a sudden showed up in cinemas across the world? Well, let me explain. Part 3: The Movie. In 2018, Nintendo announced that it was working together with animation studio Illumination Entertainment to create a Mario movie. Behind the scenes, this project had been in the works for a couple of years, and Shigeru Miyamoto himself would be overseeing every last detail of it. One key character in the movie would be Donkey Kong. Despite long periods with no big game releases, Donkey Kong had consistently ranked as one of Nintendo's most recognizable characters, according to a number of internal surveys Nintendo had done. It only made sense, therefore, to include him in the new movie. But what design to use? Mario, Luigi, Peach, and others looked more or less the same as they did in-game, just with some tweaks. But with the Donkey Kong Bananza redesign taking place at this very moment, this was a real opportunity to debut it on the big screen. Miyamoto said this: "When it comes to the movie, we decided to move forward with this new generation Donkey Kong design." After all, what would have happened if instead they had chosen to use the old look for Donkey Kong? That would have been okay in 2023, with Bananza still a couple of years away from release. But Nintendo and Illumination hoped that if their movie was a hit, they could roll right into a sequel, or multiple sequels even. There's even a long-rumoured Donkey Kong spin-off movie. If in 2023 they had committed to Donkey Kong's old design, they'd be stuck using it in all of the movie's sequels and spin-offs. Not ideal. Instead, Miyamoto chose the more forward-looking path to debut Donkey Kong's new look early to set the stage for the years ahead. Kenta Motokura, producer of Donkey Kong Bananza, touched upon this topic in an interview. Outside of this game, Donkey Kong has recently appeared in the Super Mario Bros. Movie released in 2023 and in Mario Kart World, but there's a basic character design which provided the foundation for those versions of Donkey Kong. That basic Donkey Kong design has been completely revamped. Here's Nintendo's official illustration demonstrating the point. As you can see, Donkey Kong's look in Bananza is not the same as the base design. The slacks, along with the extra fluffy fur, are specific details found in Bananza. But for the first time in 30 years, DK's basic design was totally updated thanks to all of the hard work of Bananza's development team. Yes, the new look worked perfectly for Bananza, but in games like Mario Kart World, it makes Donkey Kong much more expressive than he's ever been before. If a new Mario vs. Donkey Kong game was released with DK as the villain, the new look would work there too. Just change the character's expression to suit the situation. So, when this new character design was first seen in Mario Kart World, which launched a few weeks before Bananza, I think the reaction was mixed. For fans who'd grown up with the classic DK look, this radical change took some getting used to. There were various posts saying that Nintendo had ruined Donkey Kong, or that he looked ridiculous. But there were also many who liked the idea of a more expressive Donkey Kong, including Kevin Bayliss, who created Donkey Kong's previous design while at Rare. It's still DK, only better looking. People need to embrace change more. Everyone give a big warm welcome for the new DK. And it wasn't just Bayliss. Grant Kirkhope, the legendary composer who worked on Donkey Kong while at Rare, said this: "I think it's pretty fantastic. Nintendo are just fantastic. They just go their own path, and that's what I like about them." So this all started back in 2017 with Koizumi's request for a new 3D Donkey Kong game. But for a team like the 3D Mario team, it wasn't enough to just make a fun game. They needed to totally rethink Donkey Kong from the ground up. According to Motakura, Donkey Kong Bananza sparked the creation of a design which I think better conveys the new Donkey Kong. And I really think that's true. Yes, it's sad to say goodbye to the DK we knew and loved all this time. But at the same time, I'm excited to see where this new Donkey Kong will take us next. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Videos like this are made possible thanks to my kind patrons, including Aaron and Catherine, Arthur Nicole, Bones Vivi, Brett Prophet, Cyprian Eov, Daryl Jero, Ellie Birnbaum, Eliza the Doe, Fresh Poetic, Jim Gilsonen, Kieran Chan, Kinugu, Lucas Little, Michael Gunter, Robin Stick, Skater Pie, and Thomas Söderlund.